Within this lesson, we're going to look at how we can make our website responsive. So I'm going to open up our website that we've been working on in the last several lessons, and I'm going to do an inspect on it. And within Google DevTools, we actually have the option to be able to view this on different size screens. So I can actually toggle the different devices that are available and change it into a responsive view. And this view, I can resize the website and make it any size I want. So I've got my width there, I've got my height. I can do 100% and change that as well. So look at 50% and so on. I can also see how it's going to look like on an iPhone 6, and some of these defaults I can see on an iPad. I can rotate the iPad and so on. So a lot of good options here, and this is where we begin when we look at when we're designing our website, how it's going to perform and how it's going to look on different size screens. So we know that we set a maximum pixel width, so any size screen that gets larger than 11 or 1180, I think it was 1180 that we set it, no matter what, our main content area is not going to expand beyond that. And when we get smaller, then that main content area is contracting, and we see that we do have some issues here. So whenever we get less than roughly about 800, we don't have that spacing because we had set both of those containers on a percentage, and we don't have that spacing anymore. So that one, the side menu actually drops down and it looks very ugly. So we need a way to fix this. So let's take a look at our code and make some updates in our CSS. So we know that we want to set some breakpoints. And in order to set breakpoints, what we use is we use media query. So two different approaches. There's setting a max width, and then there's setting a min width. So setting a min width is a mobile first way of designing, and this way you set all of your default CSS styling properties, and then whenever it hits the breakpoint, then you add in additional styling to accommodate for the different size screens. But by default, and since we've already done all of this work, we're going to work down. So whenever we resize it to a smaller size, then we're going to add in that styling property. So let's take a look how this is going to work. And the thing is, you can set as many breakpoints as you want. So you initiate it by media only screen, and we set max width. So we did have an option between max and min width. So we were looking at roughly, when we were resizing that, we hit a point here roughly around 850, maybe around 860. So let's say 870 just to be sure that at this point, this is where we actually want something different to happen for those particular elements, the main and the sidebar, because they're just not resizing properly. So just to give you a better idea, usually the way that I usually like to do it is when I'm working from a desktop version to the mobile, I usually just copy these out, the ones that I've used and the ones that I want to update on the smaller size screens, and I make the adjustments here. So we have it at 60%, and the width is maybe something that I want to take care of, and I want to bring it down to 50. The float we don't need to reset, and maybe I want to bring my padding down to 0, and sidebar, so I can set it at 40. Float I don't need to set, I've already got that set up there. I don't want to set the border either because this is something that I've already got set, and padding down to 0. So we're only updating what we want to change. So now when I refresh it, so watch what happens now. Whenever I shrink down below that size, we're actually adjusting accordingly. So maybe better to illustrate this is maybe we can set that sidebar background color temporarily so that we can really get a good feel that something is happening once we hit that breakpoint. So refreshing it again, we see that whenever we're larger than 880, so take a look at the responsive size here, we're not getting those properties added in, but when we do get less than 880, then for the smaller screen sizes, we are getting these properties, and we can adjust this accordingly as well. So we can even take into consideration that now we've set them to 0, so maybe we want to do even larger, so 40. So depending again how we want to represent our content. So this might not be ideal, and we might want to set an additional breakpoint so whenever we get really low, so now we've got all of this white space hanging there, so again doesn't look really that great, that fantastic. So planning out our content and how we're developing our content, this is going to be important, but taking a look at this breakpoint, maybe it's better off to move this all the way down or underneath to make it really mobile compatible, or maybe we want to just remove it entirely. So let's set another breakpoint at 700, and whenever we get less than 700 pics, let's just stack these two elements. So same thing, same format here where we do media, media screen, and we're going to set our max width to 700, and now we've got another breakpoint. So this time let's turn that one red, and we're going to give them 100% width, and this time actually I want to clear out that. So we had set the floats to the left and to the right, so this time what I want to do is I want to clear both of those floats out so that we're not floating at all. So we don't need to adjust the padding because we already set it to 0. Same here, and here I'm going to set it to 100%. And now let's take a look at our page, see what happens when we resize. At 698 we're less than 700, so we see that we're able to resize. We can scroll down and we see the sections red, so it's fallen in nicely in line with the rest of our content, and we continue to resize our menu. And at this point, if you've developed a mobile menu, might be where you want to have a breakpoint. You might want to stack your different menu items, navigation items. So this is all dependent on what your design style is. You might want to just maybe remove some of that padding, shrink down how those navigation menu items are being presented. You might simply want to stack them horizontally. So let's do that. Let's take a look and set another breakpoint. So if our web page gets less, if the user is coming in at less than 500 pics, update some of that navigation content so we don't have to worry about main and sidebar. Those are already taken care of now on the different breakpoints. So let's take a look at all of these items here. So we just need to take the list and the hyper, the anchor text there within the list. So we've got list type of none, so we want to keep that. Border is fine, and we want to get rid of the float here. So let's just clear out both. Display block is fine. We might want to add something in there, but for now I think that should be all that we need to worry about there. Oh, of course we do need to make it 100% width. So let's go back into our editor, add in width 100%, and now when we go back out there, now we've got a full width available to us within our visual area here. So we've got all of our navigation items aligning, and we might even want to center that text whenever we get to that point. So we could do, I believe we've got our text. I'm not sure if we just double checking here to see if we're aligning our text. So we're not aligning any of our text. So we can add in text align and maybe center align that text. So let's take a look at how that's turning out. And now that that's center aligning, as we grow bigger, it goes back to its original desktop design size. And we can also set a minimum width as well. So we can set default width for the body or the wrapper. And this is another good reason why we include the wrapper, so that ever we shrink down to 500 pics and we don't want our web page to go less than 500 pics, so we could set a default of a width of 500 pics. So if we're less than 500 pics, we're always going to stay as a default of 500 pics. So a number of different options there how we can represent it. So maybe that might not be a best way to do it. So now whenever we're shrinking down, now we can drag it over, so our minimum width there. So let's update that right now. So just refreshing it. So this does, when we set these responsive sizes, sometimes Chrome is keeping some of the bigger sizes, so now it's resizing much better, even at a minimum width of 500 pix. So all depending on how you're using your website and what your design is, you could set that minimum width or you could set that full width as well. So also, if I bring this out of the different type, and I can resize it manually to also get a better idea of what's happening on our website. So we see that once we get less than 500, it still stays at that 500 and makes us scroll. So this is, again, something that's dependent on what size you want your screen to be, and if you want to be fully mobile ready, then you might want to just remove that entirely and allow it to resize all the way down. So let's take a look at that page once again. So refreshing it. So now it's just going to completely continue to resize. So maybe that is a better option as well. So there does take some time to play around with it and really get the feel of how you want your website and your web content to be presented.